So thank you all for coming. It's lovely to see you. And it's really just a privilege on my part, and actually a great personal delight to be able to welcome Marc to talk to you, because Marc and I have been friends for a very long time. We were introduced to each other by a mutual friend who's also an elected official here in Cambridge, Marjorie Decker, who's a state representative. And I remember talking to Marc when he was first interested in politics, when he was thinking of running for the school committee, and him telling me of his interest in government as a way to connect people, bring them together, and work to strengthen this community that both he and I love so much, and that has so many wonderful opportunities that you can all experience as you live here for a while, but also real challenges and a great diversity that, in a certain sense, you all represent, because you're from so many different countries and speak so many different languages, as well as many people who are from here from Boston. Cambridge similarly has many, many different communities and lots of different people. It's a small city that is very rich in that way. So Marc can speak to those ideas much more effectively than me, and I'll just point out to you that his background is as a social worker. So his concern, as I described to you in our class, to me, I think he always thinks of the people at the bottom first and a way to help them because they're people just like us. So there's Marc.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. I don't know about that Yankee hat. I just went zoned in on that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Bob, for the invite. So I'm just going to start with tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about Cambridge, including some of our relationships with the companies that do business here, and then I really want to just open it up for questions, because I want to make sure that I'm giving you what you need and what you want. So as Bob said, my background is in social work. I've been a social worker for over 25 years, working primarily with children struggling with mental illness and families struggling with issues of substance abuse, homelessness, poverty. So my focus growing up and professionally has always been on really the most vulnerable people in our community. I grew up in Cambridge. My family actually this year is celebrating our 100th year in the city, and my kids are the 5th generation to live here. I come from a long line of community activists, if you will, from my great-grandfather and my grandmother, who started our neighborhood association to bring our neighborhood and our community together to advocate for our neighborhood, to my mother, who helped start the first in the country Women's Commission, which was a city-funded commission in the 70s looking at equal rights for girls and women, and worked to pass what's called Title IX, which is equal funding for women's sports in public education and colleges and schools. So I was the youngest of 3, and I was dragged to every meeting that my mother went to, because we didn't have a babysitter and she wouldn't leave me home with my 2 older brothers for my own safety. And so I really, from an early age, was taught that you work to make your community a better place. And so that's what led me into to politics and to social work. A little bit about Cambridge. Here we are, in Cambridge Crossing, right around the corner from Kendall Square. When people think about Cambridge, they tend to think about Harvard and MIT, Kendall Square, very expensive homes, and we're certainly surrounded by an incredible amount of prosperity, right? But there's another side to Cambridge. Cambridge has a higher poverty rate than the state average. So more of our families live below the federal poverty guideline than on average in the state. We have upwards of 500 homeless people on our streets on any given night. Death by overdose has doubled in the last year on our streets. Over 50% of our public school children live in public housing. So we have a lot of people in our community who aren't realizing the prosperity that others are realizing here, okay? And those are the folks that I really try to bring a voice to in city government, because we certainly hear plenty from the folks who have access whether it's through campaign contributions or the time, ability, education, comfort level to come out and speak at city council meetings or call up the mayor. But we have a lot of people in this community who don't have that access. And so I try to be their voice. But Cambridge is a remarkable place. We have, as Bob said, the diversity in our city. About a third of our residents are foreign born. We have over 50 languages spoken in our one public high school. We are a city that really celebrates our diversity. But we're also not perfect there either, right? Because we do struggle with issues of race and class like many communities, really all communities in the United States do. And we've had some incidents where it's really brought issues of race and class to the forefront. And so those are some of the things that also that I've been working on this term. We have some of the world's top businesses and companies here in Cambridge. And Google is here, and Microsoft is here, and all the biotech companies are here, Amazon is here, and go sort of on and on and on, Facebook. And so we always struggle that's a great thing, okay? Because there was a time, I'll give you a quick little history of Kendall Square. So Cambridge was one of the top manufacturing cities in the country. We were the top candy manufacturing city in the country. We had several candy factories here. We were the top fire hose manufacturer in the world. It's probably something you don't hear about every day. And Kendall Square was really full of factories. And then in the 60s, the government took a big chunk of Kendall Square by eminent domain because Kendall Square was supposed to be where NASA was going to be located. And so there's NASA in Florida, and then they were looking for a second site. And when John F. Kennedy was president, being from here, he wanted to put NASA in Massachusetts, and Kendall Square was, a place that they decided to do it. So the government, took a lot of those factories, demolished them, and then John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And Lyndon Johnson, who became president, was from Texas, and he moved NASA to Houston, and really left Cambridge with a wasteland of Kendall Square. And so it stayed that way for a while. And during that time, Cambridge was pretty broke, to be quite honest. When I was growing up here in the 70s, a lot of people in my family, a lot of my aunts in particular, were teachers, public school teachers. And they would get what's called their pink slip. They were fired at the end of every year, and they had to reapply for their jobs, and only if there was money would they get rehired. And that was happening to a couple hundred of our teachers every year. My school was crumbling. I went to what was then called the Agassiz School, now the Baldwin School. It's a brand new building, but when I was there, it was a really old building. So our infrastructure was not in good shape. We had what was called junk bond status. Our credit was terrible. We couldn't borrow any money, so we couldn't invest in infrastructure the way we can now. And so we were in a tough spot. But then there was this effort to really try to attract biotech to Kendall Square. And so we formed the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority, and their goal was to rebuild Kendall. And so with the help of MIT and Harvard and there were a couple biotech companies that were here at the time, we attracted people and we built Cambridge, and now Kendall Square is the most innovative square mile in the world. Now, what does that mean for us as a city? It means an incredible amount of tax revenue, okay, which is good, because now we have money to do things that we couldn't do before. It creates an incredible amount of excitement. I mean, Kendall Square, when I was growing up here, you never went to Kendall Square. There was no reason. It was empty, right? Unless you wanted to, chase a rat. There was really no reason to come here. Now, there's a million reasons to come here, right? And so that's good for the community. because of the financial stability that Kendall Square brings, we now have a AAA bond rating, which is the highest bond rating that you can get, which means that we can borrow money from banks at almost no interest, very low. Now, what does that mean? Well, we are currently rebuilding 3 public schools at a cost of $500 million without any help from the state and without having to raise anybody's taxes. There is no community anywhere that you will find that can do that. And we can do that because of our AAA bond rating, and we have our AAA bond rating because of Kendall Square. So this all is good for the community. Now it also brings some challenges, right? Most notably in the area of housing. So there's a lot of people working here in Kendall Square, and most of them want to live here. You know, certainly younger folks more people want to walk to work, they want to bike to work, they want to live in a vibrant and exciting community. That sort of the exodus to the suburbs really has switched, and now people are moving back to cities. And so as more companies open here and thousands of more people come here to work, it really puts a strain on the housing market. And so back when we were a manufacturing community, right, you had people like in my family that worked assembly lines. Those people weren't getting paid a lot of money, right? And so the competition for housing wasn't as great in terms of the economic competition. Now you have a lot of people who are coming to work at Google and Microsoft and other places that are getting paid very well, right? So they come in, they want to live in Cambridge for all the reasons that we all want to live in Cambridge, and now they go to the rental market and they say to a landlord in a 3-family home, we could pay you $3,000 a month for rent. Well, a teacher can't pay that. A family that is working in the hospitality industry, you know, can't pay that. And so what we saw in Cambridge was we lost 50% over the last 15 to 20 years. We have lost 50% of what we call middle income. So kind of your typical working class, middle class families. 50% of that population is gone from our city. So we're very much like a dumbbell. We have people who live here who can afford, you can't buy a single family home in Cambridge for under $1 million. So you have a lot of people here who can afford that. And then you have a lot of people that are in public housing and subsidized housing. And those folks in the middle are fewer and fewer. And so, yes, the companies that have come here, the business, the industry has been a great asset, and it allows us to do a lot of things that other communities can't do. But there's also, like everything, there's also a flip side to that, and it's put a real strain on housing and who actually lives in our city. So we've tried to address that in a number of different ways. But in terms of, and we can, if you want to know more about that, I'll let you ask me about that. But in terms of partnerships and government working together with companies, I have a really strong belief that the companies that are doing business here get a great benefit out of being here. They certainly pay a lot of money to build here. There's a lot of cheaper places they could buy land and build a building, right? And I think Cambridge is a city that offers a lot to the people who work in these companies, the people who attend our universities. And so I think it's like a complicated marriage, right? We need these companies to be here, but they need us too. And so how do we form a partnership? And sometimes that works better than others, to be honest. And one of the things that I think we try to do is a lot of times when we think about partnerships between the businesses and the city, we often think of big things. We often think of how do we start an internship program for 100 kids or 200 kids or 500 kids? How do we you know, how do we deal with the housing issue? How do we deal with these sort of really big ideas, which is great, and we need to do that and partner with our companies to do that. But we also need to think about how do we deal with bringing those companies, really connecting those companies to the community on the ground. And so one of the things when I spoke to Dr. Neer's couple of his students before, I talked about, I went in to meet with Google about a number of things. And we were talking about how to get them more involved in the community. And they were talking again about these sort of big ideas. And I said, why don't you sponsor a Little League baseball team in East Cambridge, where you're located? And they sort of, and they're like, well, what, you know, why would we do that? And I said, because if you were to sponsor a baseball team and you had, you know, 50 kids, or if you sponsored the whole league, right, for not a lot of money, all had Google on the back of their shirts, your staff came out every Saturday morning to serve donuts and coffee, then you're actually touching people where they live, right? It's not some big abstract, oh, we give money, you know, we pay a lot of taxes, therefore we're doing our job. Because that doesn't always trickle down and translate into, you know, people can't always see that, right? So how do we get companies really involved in the community? And in this area in particular, Kendall Square, the neighborhoods that border Kendall Square, East Cambridge, Harrington, Wellington, and the Port, are some of our most low-income communities in the city. So you have a lot of kids who live in public housing in the shadows of these big buildings, and yet it's like the Emerald, what was that? I haven't seen Wizard of Oz in a while. Emerald City. You know, it's like this gated community to a lot of our kids. They don't feel that they can go into those buildings. They don't feel welcome in those buildings. They don't feel that they're going to have job opportunities in those buildings. And so I really am trying to sort of figure out how can we really make those connections on a more personal level, and really touch people where they are and where they live. Because I think that's good for everybody. I think the businesses benefit from that because they really get to know the community. They get really involved with the diversity of our community, which I think is our strength. But then also, you know, you have families that are struggling that also benefit from those relationships as well. I don't know, is that kind of a good enough general picture? So I guess, I mean, I just like to take questions if that's okay. Is that cool?
Anyone with questions? Yes, Charles.
Hey, now it's working.
There you go.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
I would like to ask you, we as Hult students, we understand we are international here, and we understand that maybe we are like a deviation in this data, and that we bring money here, we do a lot of things, that we spend a lot of money. It's expensive living in Cambridge. So how can we help and give something back for this community?
Well, I mean, you know, you spend a lot of money here and you're students, so, you know, I'm not going to ask you for money. Although there certainly are a lot of nonprofits in the community that would benefit from some money if you have parents that have a lot of money. But your time, get involved. You know, there are so many volunteer opportunities in this city that, you know, and it's a two-way street. I mean, not only will you be helping people, but you're going to be enriched, right? By working with and coming into contact with and getting to know people who you might not otherwise get to meet, right? And so, you know, there's the city website. There's a program we started, a website we started called Find It Cambridge, and it's Find It, FINDIT, Cambridge.org. And what that is we often say that Cambridge is a lot of dots but no lines. connecting those dots. We have a lot of programs in Cambridge. We have a lot of nonprofits in Cambridge. Sometimes we're not always so great about connecting them. So what we would hear from parents is, you know, there's so many opportunities for my kid, but I just don't know how to navigate and hear about all of these things. So we developed a website, and we basically taken all of the city programs, nonprofit programs, after-school programs, elder services, from birth to elderly. And we put them all together on one website, and you can go, if you're interested, you can go and you can say, oh, I'm interested in an after-school program for my 6-year-old in this neighborhood, and then you will get a list of all the programs in that neighborhood. Now, I'm guessing none of you have, you know, children that, you know, would need those programs, but it is a good way for you to also find out what opportunities are available, right? So if you're interested, you say, look, I want to do something with kids. I love working with kids. Now you can go on this website, you can pull up all the after-school programs that work with kids, and you can contact them and say, you know, I'm a student and I want to volunteer and I want to help out, what can I do? So that would be actually, even though that's not what the website was intended, I think that's another benefit of it, because you've got everything